Hello and welcome to another tutorial by Harpy Cloud Solutions. Today we're going to be creating an AKS cluster using Bicep and Azure DevOps. So let's get to it. We are going to start by going to our Azure DevOps environment and creating a new project. I'm going to call this project AKS with Bicep. I'm going to leave it as private and I'm going to select create. All right. So now that our project is done creating, we want to do something quickly before we continue. And what we want to do here is to create a service connection to Azure. All right. This enables us to deploy resources from our Azure DevOps environment to Azure. So I'm going to start by doing that. Scroll down project settings and locate service connections. Click on create service connection. So I'm going to use the Azure Resource Manager. Click on next. I'm going to do the automatic one. Click on next. So I'm just going to give this. Okay, while I'm doing that, I have to authenticate to my Azure environment. So let's do that. All right. So what I'm doing is basically, authenticating to allow access to allow Azure DevOps have access to my Azure account through this service connection. So as you can see, it's listed the various subscriptions that I have, and I just selected the Azure subscription. All right. So for resource group, I'm just going to select this resource group, and I'm going to give this service connection a name. So Azure to DevOps, something like that. All right, so I'll say grant access permission to all pipelines. This means that all pipelines that are created under this project can have access, to my Azure environment. So click save. So now this is the first part. The next thing that we have to do is to actually create or write the Bicep code, all right? Because we're going to be creating, the AKS cluster using Bicep. So let's do that. So over here, I have created a folder on my local machine named AKS using Bicep, all right? And you can see there's no file here yet. Before we continue, something important that you should have on your Visual Studio Code is installing two extensions. One is the Azure repo, and then this is it, the Azure repos. This will help you authenticate with your Azure DevOps environment. And then you also need to install the Bicep extension. This will just kind of help you automatically fill some of your codes when you're writing it with Bicep. All right, so let's go back. So I'm going to create a file and I'll call it main aks.bicep. All right, so now we have our Bicep file. And if you've worked with Bicep before, you know that you have to begin by, defining your variables, your parameters, and all that. So that's what we're going to start with right now. All right. So it starts with at description, and then you have to put the description in the bracket. So you see why I told you it's important to have the Bicep extension because it just helps you kind of like autofill what you're working on or what you're trying to write. So the name of the managed cluster, just give it that. And so what's going to be the parameter? And this is just for cluster name. So all these parameters, some of them I'm going to define them here, but some of them I'm going to define them in my pipeline. So just gonna watch this and see how it's done. Okay. So I'm going to describe something else, and that's the location. The location of AKS resource. Um, okay, next line. Param, and then location is going to be a string value equals to resource group dot location. So it's going to be the same location where the resource group is situated in. And we're going to, define that also in our variables. So the next thing, let's define the DNX prefix. Description. This is an optional DNS prefix to use with hosted Kubernetes API server. Okay, so I'm also going to define this variable in my Azure DevOps pipeline. So we have this. So you kind of like get the sense of how writing a bicep code works. You have to, like I said, define all your, parameters, your variables at the top, and then when you're done defining all your variables, you come at the bottom and start to, actually define the resource that you want to create. So just because of time, I'm just going to fast forward a bit. So now that we have all this defined, let's create the resource. So the resource we want to create is AKS. All right. And I'm just going to use this version. Put this here. So you're going to start by normally when you're, first of all, to do this, you first of all have to have an understanding of creating AKS, whether manually through the portal, using Terraform, whatever means. Why I said this is because you have to know all the values that you have to declare, okay? Like, for example, you obviously need, a name for your cluster. When you're creating your cluster, you would need location, all right? So all these things is made easy if you already have a prior knowledge of what is needed to create an AKS cluster, okay? So next thing, I would also want to define my identity, and then I'll just use a system assigned one. All right. You can see how helpful having the extension is. It just helps you fill up your stuff quickly. All right. Let's continue. So I'll define here the DNS prefix before I go to the agent pool profile. I remember I already called it up above in my variables, so I'm just going to reference it. So the next thing is my agent pool profiles. Let's do this. Okay. So I'd like to put a space after my stuff just to make it more readable. Agent pool. All right. OS disk size. I'm just going to refer to the variable. Count. We have this. VM size. Gonna call this. We're almost done. Just stay with me. Linux. Okay. All right. The next thing we want to define the Linux profile, and then we'll be done creating this, and then move on to pushing our code to Azure DevOps. Okay, just going to press enter here. Like I said, I like to put some space for readability. Press enter there. So I'll just call what I've already defined. Then for SSH, okay. So now we're going to see. So what I've done before now is to create an SSH, like a public key, all right? And it's saved on my local system in a folder called .ssh, all right? So what I'm going to do is on my pipeline in Azure DevOps, I'm going to, you know, assign a value to the variable called SSH RSA public key. All right, so let's do this. Let's put this key data. All right. Like I said, spacing it out, making it more readable. So the last thing we'll do is just to output control plane. So I'm just going to do properties .fqdn. All right. So I'm done with my bicep file. All right. So we have our bicep file. The next thing that we want to do now is to actually push this to Azure DevOps. So let's go back to Azure DevOps. All right, this is the project we created, AKS Bicep. So come back here and let's create a repository. So there's this one already here by default when I created the project. So you can either, if you have your code in Git, you can just click on import and then put the link of the, the Git repo or the code. You know what, normally you would do Git clone a particular URL. So you just kind of like put that URL. So that's what you do here, just put that URL. But I'm not using Git. I'm going to actually push what is in my local machine to Azure DevOps. So just click terminal, new terminal. Okay. So I'm going to initiate this as a Git repository. So I've done that. Next thing I want to do is git add. All right. So next thing I want to do is git commit, initial commit. So the next thing I want to do is to push. Okay, so because I want to put this here, I'm just going to copy this code. Git remote add. Copy, come back here. All right, so the next thing we want to do is to do this. All right, so let's wait for this. Great, so now we've pushed our code to Azure DevOps. Let's see that. I'll just refresh.
Hello, viewers. My name is Kachi.
This is a short break just to urge and ask you to like this video and subscribe to this YouTube channel. This channel is used to bring educative videos that are relevant in the information technology world. We bring videos on web development, cloud computing, DevOps, and even artificial intelligence (AI). But the videos are not just limited to that. We also provide videos as they are relevant to the community. We ask that you support us through your likes and subscription. Thank you. I look forward to seeing you as part of our subscribers. Now, let's get back to business. So, now to the interesting part. We saw that, you can use either pushing your code from your Visual Studio Code IDE to your Azure DevOps repo or importing a code from your GitHub repository. That's like basically using the Git clone. All right. So now that we've pushed our code to our DevOps repo, as you can see, there's the code. The next thing we want to do is to get to the interesting part and create a pipeline. So just click create pipeline. So you can start by using the classic editor or using YAML. I'm going to select the one for YAML. I'll click AKS with Bicep and I'll say a starter pipeline because obviously I do not have a pipeline. So as you can see here, the first thing says trigger master. What this is saying is that the trigger for this pipeline will be a push to the master branch. So whenever you push something to the master branch, it's going to initiate a run for this pipeline. But I don't want that, so I'm just going to select none. And we can see here that it's using the pool that it's going to run on is an Ubuntu machine. Okay, so with that said, I'm just going to start by taking out this part. Okay, just take out this. And I'm going to do something simple. So, you know, if you want to create, let's say we're not using a pipeline, we want to just do it normally with an Azure CLI. There's a code you would run to create your AKS cluster. So as long as you have that knowledge, so let's say you want to create an AKS cluster with your Azure CLI, what you do is AZ group create, you mention the resource group, you mention the location, then that's to create like the resource group. And then the deployment group where your AKS cluster is going to sit, you'd also define that. So we're just going to use that mentality to, create our AKS cluster even using the Azure pipeline. So basically using DevOps pipeline requires the knowledge of running your codes even outside DevOps pipeline. I don't know if you get what I mean. Anyways, let's get to it. So there's this very nice feature in the pipeline that enables you, that assists you in writing codes. Okay. So I'm just going to select Azure CLI and what service connection am I going to use? I'm just going to select subscription and I'm going to click authorize so that it has like access to the entire subscription. All right. And it can create a resource group for me instead of it just being created in one resource group. Cool. So now script type, I'm going to select shell. Script location, I would say inline script. So now I'm going to post the script. I'm just going to post the script in there and then we'll walk through the script. So now this script here says AZ group create. The name of the resource group will be the variable that we're going to define. Then there's location, which is going to be the location that we're going to define. Then when that is done, that's the resource group is created. We're also going to do AZ deployment group create, which would reference the resource group that has been created, the template file. Then we have the other parameter values that you normally have to call when you're creating your AKS cluster. So now, just also for you to know that the template file that is being spoken of in this line here is referring to the main aks.bicep. Okay, so that the script that we push to your Azure repo. So that's what we're talking about when it says template file. So now you see all this here. I'm just going to click add. Then after clicking add, I'm going to define these variables, because by now you should know that these variables have to be defined, and I haven't defined them. All right, I'm just going to push this back a bit. Let's see, take this back. I don't need that much indentation. This is fine. All right. So now there's one thing that is missing, which is our variables. There are different ways to define your variables. You can either define your variables here, that you'd let me just delete this. Come down here and define your variables. Then what you do is, oh, this keeps coming there. Resource group name, and then I'll just call it RG Bicep AKS. So I can do this. Another thing I can also do is to come here and define the variables here. So what that would be is resource group name, and then I'll say RG hyphen bicep hyphen AKS. All right. And then it's showing you that if you're defining this in YAML, this is how you're going to write it, this here. All right. And that's what we've done. If you look inside in this inline script, we defined it this way. So I'm just going to use this method because in a production environment, in a working environment, you don't want to display some sensitive variables on your YAML file, because anyone can have access to it. So I'm just going to use this, click OK, and that variable we're going to define is location, and I'm going to call this East US. All right. The next thing that I'm going to define, just going to remove this here, is the Linux admin username, because if you remember, it's also part of the variables that we stated when we're writing our CLI command. So Linux admin username, and I'll just call it Azure user. All right. So let's click save. So you can see that all I'm doing is these values here, I'm just defining them in my variables. So anyways, because I'm not using this one again, I'm just going to delete it. That's deleted. Remember, I also spoke about the SSH key, and I told you that I already have something that I created here. I'm just going to open it using Visual Studio Code, and this is it here. This is it. I'm just going to copy this and go to Azure DevOps, and I'm going to go to my variables and type SSH RSA public key. All right. Just confirming that's the name I gave it. SSH RSA public key. Yep. And then I'll paste this value. So you can also decide to select keep this value as secret, and then it's gonna put this dotted stuff like a password, or you can also leave it this way. It's your choice. All right. Another thing we need to define is the template file, and I'll probably just define it inside the variables, and I'll show you what I mean. But before then, let's define the DNS prefix, and I'll call this my AKS cluster. And okay, so what else haven't I defined? So define all this. Let's click save. So now the next thing I have to define, I'm going to do this one here. I'm going to define the template file. I have to indent this. All right. So my template file is basically in the main AKS, the Bicep, is in the root directory. So I'm just gonna do this. All right, so let's go through this again. We started by selecting a trigger and we put it as none. Then we put our variables. So I've defined all the variables here. I just defined this one here just so you can get a sense of different ways to define a variable. We have the pool, we have the actual CLI command that is going to be run when we for we to create this cluster in our environment. So now we've done all that, let's just click on save and run. So I'll just see what it says. View permit permission granted. So now let's look at as our job is ready to go. So for some people that if you're just using Azure DevOps for the first time, you might get an issue or like an error about parallel jobs, how you can create parallel jobs. And let me just show you that. Yeah. So here, you probably have 0 parallel jobs if you've not purchased any. But then you can actually get one for free by filling out a form, and then you just wait for Microsoft to get back to you, maybe like 24 hours, 48 hours, and they would assign it to your private project. Okay, so that's how to do that. Let's go back to our pipeline. Okay, so we see that there's an error, and it's also good that we get errors because it also helps us to see the places where we can have issues. So it says an error occurred while reading the file. So it could not find this file. So that means I did not reference the path properly. So let's go back and then you see this. See this part is in the main, like under the main repo. So let's just go back here. Where's my pipeline? And click on it. Click on edit. Make sure my variables are there. And put a dot. Validate and save. Save. So click on run. So run. I'm here. So we're just going to wait for this pipeline to run. If there are any other errors, we'll look into it and walk through it together. So after 7 minutes and 55 seconds of running, our AKS cluster has created successfully. So as you saw, the fix for the first error was just to ensure that to ensure that it's pointing to the right path in the YAML file, and that kind of like solves the problem. So if you go to our Azure environment, search for the resource group that we created, you can see that it will bring out an AKS cluster. Let's click on it, and voila, we have our AKS cluster created using Bicep and Azure DevOps. Obviously, we know that AKS creates two resource groups, so this is the second one that was created, which contains all other resources like load balancer, your agent pool, the NICs and so on and so forth. So yeah, this is basically how to, create an AKS cluster using Bicep and Azure DevOps. So do you need assistance setting up your Azure DevOps environment or even working with Azure pipelines? We are just a click away. You can contact us either through our website or using the number displayed on the screen, or you can email us at info@harpycloudsolutions.com, and we will respond to your email as quickly as you can say Jack Robinson. Yeah, I said that. All right, then. See you in the comment section. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and let us keep on doing what we're doing. See ya.